Hi, everyone, and welcome to Invention Mode. I'm Tanya Kohen, and this podcast is about what it really takes to spark meaningful change inside modern organizations. I've been wanting to create this space for a while. I talk to so many smart people doing inventive things behind the scenes. Not the flashy innovations, but the small, clever fixes that quietly unlock big value. You'll hear me say invention a lot, and that's intentional. Innovation tends to get the spotlight, but invention, it's often quiet. It's when someone finds a smarter way to route a process or connect the dots, and those moves add up, sometimes more sustainably than the big stuff. Each episode, I'll talk with leaders, experts, and accidental inventors who rethink how things are done. We'll explore how to build a culture where invention happens every day and why that mindset matters now more than ever. Welcome back to the Invention Mode podcast. In our latest episodes, we've primarily talked about invention showing up in the corporate environment with enterprise specifics. Today, let's turn our focus to the startup world, an environment that practically breathes invention and its products and business models. But there is a common silent growth killer lurking in the background, the tech stack. In the race to scale, many startups are, as the saying goes, building the plane as they fly it. They grab a tool for CRM, one more for accounting, and each solving an immediate urgent problem. But over time, this patchwork of solutions becomes a tangled mess. It creates data silos, introduces security vulnerabilities, and bogs down teams with manual workloads. What starts as a necessary shortcut ends up holding the entire company back from its potential. But how can founders and finance leaders apply an inventive mindset to this foundational challenge? My guest today has seen this story play out time and again and has a powerful framework for turning each chaos into strategic advantage. I'm absolutely delighted to welcome Maria Frolova to Invention Mode. Welcome, Maria.
Thanks for having me.
Sure. What makes Maria's voice so essential is the unique bridge she builds in her work. As a fractional CFO, she specializes in helping startups scale without running out of money. Maria started her career in investment banking at JP Morgan, private equity, and corporate development, where she led multiple M&A, debt, and equity financing transactions, including IPOs. In the past decade, she has built and led finance for seed to Series C startups in AI, fintech, edtech, e-commerce, and marketplaces. Maria is currently a fractional CFO and advisor working with pre to C to Series C startups. Before we jump into the interview, tell us a little more about your work, about what you do as a fractional CFO, about your work with startups, and how you actually transition. How did you build this bridge between your investment banking career, your corporate career, and the startup world?
That's a very, very interesting detour indeed. So I spent 11 years with JP Morgan working first in New York and then in Europe. And at that point, I was working mostly with large cap corporations, companies of the scale that they're about to go public. So we do IPOs for them or, buying something in the multi-billions. So I have seen finance, I worked with finance, but I didn't necessarily know what's under the hood, right? I would see the financial reporting, notes, whatever financial models that they develop. I would rework that information. I never knew how these things happen. So that was always a bit of a point of curiosity for me. Then I'm transitioned to private equity, and I had this pretty crazy project when we bought 11 companies, slapped their holding, and the idea was to go public as soon as possible. And at that point, I discovered that it takes about 270 days to produce a financial statement, which
Wow.
I don't think there is an exchange on this planet that would actually accept that. So it turns out the main problem was basically finance. It was 11 disjointed finance functions with nothing in common. Not even a common chart of accounts, no KPIs, no tech stack. So we had to postpone the IPO, but we had to rebuild the entire tech stack. And that's where I took my first interim CFO role. And I found out that I don't know anything about finance. And, as a banker, it was a bit of a disappointing thing. I thought I knew it all about finance, but apparently I knew different type of finance. And that's how I got curious. So when I moved to Silicon Valley, I wanted to be as an operator. I wanted to build those functions and use the experience I got through this project of consolidating entities. But it was a huge discovery process for me, because you kind of arrive and this is a brand new company, and as you said, you're building a plane, which means there's nothing in finance. So my first it was like, where is everything? There's nothing. There's Excel and there's usually pretty poor accounting, because founders, most of them are technical backgrounds, engineers, so they get served the financial statement and they will look at it, and it wouldn't be very useful. So it goes how it goes. It's typically outsourced accounting. So I decided that what I want to do, I want to build the financial engine that is scalable, because once finance is an area where you have a view into every function of the companies. That makes it pretty unique, right? So if you do it right, you have a lot to say in terms of strategy. You have a lot to say about efficiency. You have a lot to say about what you're investing money in, because you can't invest in everything at once, which a lot of startups tend to do, because your cash balance is finite and the uses are not. So and this is a very rewarding part. It is very unstable in terms of risk, right? A lot of startups go out of business, and all the efforts you put into it and your equity becomes less valuable, if not zero. Having said that, it's extremely rewarding when you are laying a foundation that would see the company through the very early stages to sustainable revenue and then to scaling. The business model is becoming more complex, and you kind of hope you're evolving with it as a finance lead, and your finance function evolves as well. So you kind of integrate yourself to become instrumental to company strategy. So in terms of personal impact, I think it's a way better deal than either sitting in a large corporation doing one specific function, just because you get to do pretty much everything. GTM analytics, sometimes I used to be data head as well, because it's a different discipline, but I'm the one with numbers. It was a pretty
Right.
synergistic job. So
Yeah.
and in terms of what I do as a fractional CFO, it could be anything. I could come in and just build it from scratch, because as the companies approach seed stages and they actually get some money to manage, that's when they need a fractional CFO. A lot of founders don't realize that, but it's true.
Yeah, yeah. Wow, there's a lot to unpack here, and I like how you said just lay the foundation. I think that's so important. And yes, it's easy to miss, and then you are building on a poor foundation. Many processes can go wrong in this scenario. So yeah, and I can also relate to the changing perspectives, I think, as well, because me personally, when I first started working with Wave Access, which is the company I'm with right now, they're software developers and IT consulting firm. And so when I first started working with them as a consultant, I only had my corporate experience. And so that was one perspective. And then when we started working more with startups and on projects, when founders would come in with their big idea and we sit through a workshop with them, the product design from the IT standpoint, and then they start thinking about their business model. Oh, this is what we need from the tech standpoint to kind of support our future business model. It's mind blowing. It changes many things for you, and you kind of expand your horizons as you dive into projects like that. So I can definitely see how it's an exciting experience for sure. All right. Well, so Maria, you worked with startups from C to Series C, and at what stage does the tech stack debt typically start to become a real problem, in your opinion? And what are the first warning signs, like manual workarounds or data inconsistencies that founders often miss?
You got the two main ones, I think.
Yeah.
I remember vividly, I was trying to build GTM analytics for a company. It was after Series B, so I was hoping to get clean data and some consistencies, and I pulled one metric from three different dashboards, and it was different each time.
Yeah.
So that's when my heart sank, and I realized that problem is probably bigger than I'm seeing it. And it turned out to be absolutely true. There was no even common definition of the metric. Like, different teams understood it completely differently, and that's why it was designed differently. Sources used were different, attribution models were different. So it turned into a huge data cleanup process. So when you see this happen, 3 places produce the same metric, the answer is different, you're in trouble.
Right.
There's a big cleanup. Another one is the manual processes, right? And what our sin, like mortal sin, I think, in finance, because we're looking at everybody's efficiencies except ours, it looks like. As a company grows in complexity, we take care of everybody, but not ourselves, right? So you find that close is actually certain tasks take longer and longer and longer. That first you had to merge 2 Excels, now you have to merge 3 Excels, then 4, then you have to call data team so they merge it for you. And rarely people address these issues practically. So what I've found in my experience, and I am not very disciplined about it, but what helps is to take, at least on a quarterly basis, take an audit of various tasks and standardized process and see how, like, which one takes the most time. And if you see a dynamic that something is taking a long, long time and longer with every quarterly close, there's probably some room for automation. And you don't know what you don't know. It fixes a lot of times way easier than you might think. So when I had 2 roles, data and finance, I was way more efficient. I would just go to my data team and like, hey, can we merge this couple of databases so we don't have to do it in Excel? And the solution was typically found, right? It could be implementing software, right? But it could be an easy fix. You just don't ask and you don't get. And I think there's also other indirect science. So for example, if everybody's using Looker or some data visualization tool and everybody's complaining about the time to load, you have problems. You have
Mhm.
data problems. You probably have like 10 data tables instead of 2. So, there are indirect science, but what I noticed, people are so busy with critical things when you're a startup, then you just like let the problem go unless it becomes unbearable. So if you find the time to be a little bit more proactive, you're probably not going to get to the stage when there's a complete breakdown of everything and people are quitting because they're overwhelmed and they can merge another spreadsheet.
Yeah, yeah. Would you say somewhat similar problems can appear in any size of, and kind of any maturity stage of a company, right? Because maybe it's just this day and age that we live in, and so much data around us, and so much opportunity to use
Yeah.
more data. And so I personally know that I've seen pretty mature finance departments kind of deviate a little into this route of manual, especially when, for example, a new business is opening somewhere and it's just everything, well, somewhat like a startup world, right? When you kind of, you have to launch a new project or a new business unit and it's go, go, go. So it's like, has to be so quick. So there are some, yeah, again, some patchwork is happening. And yeah, let's just do this on a spreadsheet. We don't have a system for it right now, or we don't have time to truly integrate those 2 ERP systems during the M&A acquisition. There's no time for this right now, right? But then, yeah, it can lead to huge, huge problems. So,
Yeah.
Tech, when you and I had this prep session for this episode, you said, I started thinking about tech stack. Is it really that exciting? It's a topic that's, of that much relevance to finance? And then you yourself said, oh, yeah, it is. It definitely
Yeah,
is
I answered my
so
own
important.
question. And I think have I had to give a question, like a recommendation to a founder, tech stack, it needs to be stage appropriate, right? So what we do wrong always in finance, we don't prioritize our tech stack because there's product related, engineering related tech stack, or revenue generating tech stack. This gets priority. We always wait until it's impossible to wait before we upgrade. But one thing to get early is the data quality, data architecture. You don't know when you're kind of very early stage, if something happens on the back end. Okay, we could spend like, I don't know, another week optimizing it, or we can just slap another one, do a little stitch, and it works. But it works only that long, right? So the examples I was giving you, it's not a late stage company. They just barely lifted B round, so they're
Mhm,
fairly young. They were maybe 4 years in existence.
mhm.
The problems took about a year to fix. So
Wow.
in 3 years, or say 4 years, you accumulated enough of problems that it was a project to fix it, and it took a year. And until then, a lot of things were just going wrong. Looker was glitching, data was not consistent. A lot of if you had to spend time on one thing, maybe it's not finance tech stack, but at least give us clean data. because,
Right.
give us something.
Because it can escalate so quickly, to your point.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
every fix just adds more iteration, more problems, more manual cleans. It just keeps accelerating. So I think that data sanitation is something to spend time on from a very early stage.
definitely. We often hear that startups are building the play while flying it, as we mentioned a couple of times today. While that's true for the product, why is that approach so dangerous when applied to the financial and operational tech stack? And we discussed data, but like especially from the data security standpoint. And why should a security audit be a non-negotiable first step? Do you think?
I Well, there is truth to it, obviously, but let me just say that finance tech stack is also, flying a plane and building it. When for
Yeah.
an early stage company, very early stage, some basic accounting and Excel is enough. It really is, right? You just don't have enough of data to deal with, and you probably have better if you have a cash balance of 200,000, right? You don't necessarily want to go and buy a enterprise grade ERP if you can
Right.
invest in something else. Then, as you scale, you have to add FP&A tools, data visualization, vendor payments automation, a lot of things, cybersecurity. It depends on the business, obviously. It could be e-commerce platform. So whatever it is, you kind of like with every stage of the company, you have to have stage appropriate finance. And I do it with Excel is okay until seed. And then you start having other needs and you have to proactively invest in it. So in this way, we are also building. The plane is flying. We have a cabin. So we're building out our cabin as the plane is flying. Having said that, we really don't have the luxury of trial and error at all. And the role of CFO is one of the main things is risk management, and not just financial risk, like risks in general. So I'm of the school of thought that CEO, CTO, and compliance are responsible for the entire tech stack of the whole company. So it's not just finance tech stack; it's centralized roadmap. It is a strategy, and there's have to be procedures. I'll give you a pretty shocking but true example.
Uh-huh.
When I worked for a company and the CEO was very excited about AI. AI was fairly new but very hot. So we have a town hall and the CEO goes, yeah, it's like AI is the future, retool or die. So basically we're going to be evaluating each and every one of you on how well you use AI. Yeah, and that's mid-year. So what happened was it wasn't only company doing AI implementations. Every team started doing their own AI tech stack. Every person added their personal AI tech stack. So by the time we got everything under control, I mean, I think we all had a micro stroke. Everybody with the CEO was like, "Oh my god!" And it was a legitimate heart attack. So by the time we got the strategy together, approval processes, convinced everybody that thoughtless AI implementation might not be in our best interest, and we did an audit, and I can say it was probably a divine intervention, that nothing bad happened and no
Wow.
PI leaked anywhere, and we didn't end up in a courtroom. But it was literally so many risks. We had like 45 risks with
Wow,
high
that's very
visibility. Yeah, and it's just only a couple of months. In addition to that, since there was no coordinated strategy, we found out that there were like 3 or 4 various AI tools used by different teams doing essentially the same thing. So we basically
ah,
bought the same functionality 3, 4 times, and obviously that was not a very smart cost decision. So I would say, yeah, startups want to be agile, but you want to be agile within reason, right? Having 45 new security risks in just 2 months is absolutely possible. And especially if you're dealing with anything related to either PII, money flows, or anything that's vulnerable to fraud, you really can't make it a chaotic process, right? So the role of CFO is not only to watch out for the finance tech stack, but have a view across the entire company. Obviously, not alone. It helps to
of
have
course.
CTO and compliance people on board as well. But I think, in the AI world, where the risks are accumulating way quicker than the solutions to them, you just can't not watch out.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I very much agree with you. And I've been also seeing, and again, yeah, I'm very much for the agile process and experimentation, but should be in controlled environment of sorts, right? Because what I also don't really kind of gives me a pause when, for example, I see kind of companies encouraging their people to reinvent their process on their own. And you just spoke about this. Yeah, it can be, to me, it can be a good thing to come together and talk about it. Like, let's have a discussion. Let's have few sessions, discovery sessions. How can we improve? Which tools should we use? Let's talk about it, discuss all of us together in one room. That's productive. While just leaving this up to each and every person to figure out for themselves, then you end up with very much unknown. And yeah, that's not a consistent process at all, especially if the person does figure out some things, like even in a good way, but then they leave. So you're left with no knowledge and no transition of, of the experience of an
Yeah, no,
expertise.
the documentation is another thing,
Yeah.
right? I mean, the
Yeah.
data sanitation and lack of documentation, these are sins almost every startup goes through. And yeah, if a product manager departs and they have 5 years worth of expertise, the expertise departs. So
Yeah.
you have to document.
It's one of the largest risks, yeah. Well, let's talk about invention a little, on a more positive note. Let's say invention kind of is being done right, and all is sunny and bright. But just curious about your perspective on invention, and we're kind of untangling a messy stack, like tech stack. Is it Do you think it's only just an IT project? And well, you mentioned that finance and CFO probably should be overseeing the whole tech stack of the whole organization, which I agree with. And that's why, again, back to corporate setting, CTOs and CIOs often report to CFOs in larger organizations as well, because it makes sense. But as far as invention goes, where do you see the opportunity for genuine invention in this process? Is it in creatively configuring and integrating existing tools, or is it buying new tools? Is it a combination, maybe?
Y- I don't know if there is one answer, right? All
Yeah.
of these three can work. And, I think fortunately or unfortunately, I've been through a lot of various software implementation, either as a head of finance or head of data, that included merging data bases and tech stacks after M&A, that included, implementing Salesforce, which we had to do twice just because it was not done correctly. And we'll talk about why in a second. Replacing QBO with, say, NetSuite once you grow out of QBO, which also happens. And, implement and also building tools such as homegrown inventory management tool, because we kind of were in the middle of, large ERP doesn't work for us yet, but the small kind of off-the-shelf solutions didn't work either, right? So we had to
Uh-huh.
develop something
Uh-huh.
on our own, because otherwise, it will be way too costly for us and not enough data just yet. So I've done them all, and I think it's it's more about how you do it. So the invention is probably finding a good balance. Like first, there's a temptation to expect the tech stack to fix all your problems. Right. So one of the reasons that horrible implementation of 11 companies worth of IT was done well and actually did it. We managed to solve a lot of problems, and we condensed the time from 270 days to close to, I believe, 120 in just a couple of months. And
Oh.
it kept getting better. Just a few things, it requires a little bit after work as well. Is that we sat down and we figured out that processes, methodology, metrics, approaches, chart of accounts, everything needs to be worked out before we slapped any software on it. Because otherwise you will be stuck with people are trying to fit the information, data, processes that don't fit into the system. And that will not serve any efficiency, or the data will just not be reliable, right? If that's not the metric that you're used to, you're going to shove in something that you think is the metric, but you're not sure what it is. So in the end, 1 + 2 is not 3, it's maybe 17. So we
Hmm.
all want to get on the same page. And, with AI as well, it actually opens it up for more hallucinations. Like, do you want
Uh-huh.
to, if you don't have the data or your data is faulty, do you want AI to hallucinate it for you? Well, might make decisions on this basis, so probably not. Same thing with processes, right? AI will not design a process that works for your business. It might if you work together for like 17 years, he knows the business as well as you do. But until then, you need to prepare before you roll anything, right? And another one is buying a fancy tool that doesn't fit your processes and trying to kind of work around it. So that would happen to that Salesforce implementation. Unfortunately, product team had more to say about configuration of the funnel than the sales team. So what ended up happening, sales team couldn't work because they had to redesign all their processes, and there were also regulatory hurdles that define the shape of those processes. So we had to just redo it. And implementing Salesforce twice, it's a bit costly. So why not do it once, for example?
Yeah,
But the,
absolutely.
the most inventive thing, and I don't know, I don't have a solution, is the disconnect between expertise and understanding of business of a business user and the technical team that will be implementing it. It's almost like if you don't have a good translator, the business rarely properly formulates what they're doing, why, taking the time to explain the metrics they're trying to implement for whatever reason, or problem to solve. What does it do? What exactly? Just explain in business terms what it is. And then the teams who are misunderstanding what they're actually doing build a solution that doesn't work for the user. So that happened more than once. And I guess, the technical writers for that, for larger companies, I'm sure there's a translator. In startups, the number of disconnects, broken telephones, and everybody getting really upset with each other because after half a year of waiting, I got served something that doesn't even answer my question, makes it worse, more complicated. The number of such times is definitely more than one. Let's put it this way: every other implementation runs into one of these problems.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I love it. So it's definitely process management, and then process owners being present at every stage of the implementation. Basically, that's
Yeah, and a good
given.
translator. You kind of need somebody who understands both sides.
Agreed, agreed. From a fractional CFO perspective, what personal traits or habits separate the founders who successfully navigate these growing pains by building to scale from those who get stuck in just get it done mentality?
Well, the biggest one is ego. And
Yeah.
I personally always walk away from somebody who just cannot be challenged. Unfortunately, you don't always know that from the outstart. 'Cause, I mean, I have a ton of respect to founders. They are my heroes. A lot of them are engineers who okay, designing a product is what they do. It's a beautiful product, but then you need GTM. Then you need to build a business that is scalable. And then you also need to make sure you don't run out of money in the process. That's so many disciplines that, especially for the first time founder, this is absolutely uncharted territory. So to become a good CEO, you have to realize at some point that you can't do all these things by yourself, and you can't make all the decisions just on the basis of your intuition. But there's also founders, I don't know if it's ego or I call it ego. It could you call it whatever you want. But basically every time you challenge them, they perceive it as a personal attack, and they will do it anyway, right? So there's almost no point in challenging them. But me as a CFO, I can not challenge the data says what it says, not what people want it to say. So for those founders, I probably would recommend not to get a CFO because we will just hate each other. But also, there is a good probability that the company will not make it through the scaling stage. And I have seen people burning 200 million in 2 years to reduce revenue. That happens too.
Mm,
That's not listening to data.
yeah, yeah. Agreed. What is one practical inventive step a startup leader can take this week to start addressing their tech stack challenges without needing a huge budget or a complete overhaul? So easy peasy. What's your number one advice, Maria?
Yeah, where is that magic wand that will fix everything? Yeah,
Right.
spend their money. I think it's not going to be magic, but there was just an example that I really liked in one of the companies I worked with, and it's a good time to do it. It's we're going into planning processes if somebody hasn't started yet. So what one of the CEOs liked doing, and he would get all his CXOs to write 3 inefficiencies or bottlenecks that are
Mm,
major epic pain for their teams. And then when the executive CXO meetings are going, they would discuss. Some of them were not necessarily anything related to tech stack. It would be just a bad process or some understaffing. But inevitably, among those three top pains of every CXO, there would be something that somebody could find a solution or be like, hey, you can hop on our system. You will get that data. Why you're spending 17 hours connecting 75 different spreadsheets and running whatever Python and whatever analysis, I can give you this data, right? So a lot of times, or somebody else would be, oh, okay, I have the same problem. At that point, it becomes clear that you need to improve your tech stack and get something that's used by several teams and everybody's happy, right? So this kind of exercises, they're not magic, but you would be surprised how many silos the smallest corporations get. I mean, there are teams, there's silos even in a company that's under 20 employees. I don't know how that happens, but it does.
Yeah. And I think throughout today's conversation, you gave a brilliant framework for things like that, because there were a few times when you mentioned, think about your workflow, think about your process, think about what you're spending most time on, think about if there is something that you're spending too much time on, which should just take you minutes, but it takes you hours. That's a red flag. Think about that. Think why it's happening, right? And yeah, and I'm so with you on that, because I think every person in any organization, especially in a smaller staffed organization like a startup, and there is this drive very often, and the mission and the founder's personality, which is it's all great. It can be really exciting time, but also it's dangerous to kind of forget about efficiencies in the process, because as you said, it's a the money is not there infinitely, right? So it's kind of you have to move. You have a runway, and so you have to move efficiently.
And know
So
the runway, which is another
yeah.
pitfall.
Yeah. Well, that's great. As far as our rapid fire, final three questions for you, Maria. What does an invention mindset mean to you?
It means the opposite of absolutely despised and hated by me. Uh, we do it because we always do it this way. And that's how everything that you described with people just putting up with manual processes, having to do the same stupid thing every month that takes 17 hours and nobody's doing anything about that's it. Like nobody, like from finance people, it's a curse, right? We're always like, yeah, monthly close, I hate this. It will take 24 hours of my time, and we keep doing it.
Mhm.
And very rarely you raise your hand like, hey, why am I doing this? Can I just call someone and see if we can automate it? And and that's also kills the progress, right? You don't look for workarounds. Well, I mean, you do look for workarounds, but you don't look for a solution to the problem just because we've always done this. Like, who said you did it right the first time? Why you keep doing it the same way? Or you keep it was right back then, but now 3 years later, is it still the right thing? Right? It's not a constitution. You don't have to stick to it.
Right, right, exactly. What do you think is missing in today's tech stack for finance and ops?
Uh, there might be various things missing. Like one tool that I would personally like, it's ironic CFO is watching out for everybody's efficiencies. They don't know what their own people do. They're busy, right? Legit busy.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you could unlock more efficiency if you had a better view in their day-to-day lives. And finance people and operation people are troopers. They're not. They don't have a mentality of revenue earning guys, right? They're just like we're sitting there grinding. So I wish there was like a better tool that would give visibility into what everybody is busy with and which tasks are consuming the most time. It's difficult with ad hocs, but with standardized tasks, you definitely could find efficiency if somebody just saw what they are. So I think that one is missing. Just efficiency of finance team tool. That would be awesome. And I think another thing that's missing, it's philosophical. It's stage appropriateness, right? We always are behind. We always are working on something that's should have been replaced 2 years ago, right? We're still stitching our like QuickBooks manually. If you have 50 legal entities, we always put ourselves last, and which is ironic because we control the budget, right? But we kind of always shy from, keeping up the stage appropriate tech stack.
Yeah. If you could improve one thing in a business, not necessarily tech related, what would it be?
Communication.
Mhm.
I mean, if big or small companies, things break down, right? You don't bring in the right people at the right time. And, when I was leading data, that was one of the pitfalls. People would build something and they'd be like, hey, we need a dashboard. There's no data infrastructure that you built as you were building that thing, right? Well, if you called me like a month ago, I could deliver it today. But you called me now, so it will have to be 6 months now. And this is completely unnecessary. And unfortunately, it's very rare that people actually get the task force and communicate properly and in a timely manner. So that would be my one wish, especially if you're 20 people. There's no explanation for that.
No excuse for not talk to each other. Yeah, agreed. Well, a huge thank you to you, Maria, for this conversation. Truly insightful perspective for our listeners, and I really enjoyed talking to you today. So thanks for your time, and hopefully our listeners enjoy this as well.
Thank you for inviting me. It was a pleasure, and hopefully the listeners enjoy it.
Thank you. That's it for today's episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, please subscribe and leave a review. It really helps us grow. And I'd love to hear from you. Share your own story of invention with me on LinkedIn. In the coming episodes, we'll continue to decode the mindset, approaches, and cultures that turn what if into what's next. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time on Invention Mode.